This week's video brought to you by Cold Brew. It's like coffee, but it's cold. Alright, polyrhythms. What are they? What aren't they? Why does it matter? I've seen a lot of videos recently and a lot of people teaching concepts and calling them polyrhythms when they actually aren't. And a lot of times they're actually talking about what's called a polymeter. So I thought I'd go ahead and try to clear up some confusion that I'm seeing a lot online. Since I spent the past 2 years studying with Pete Magadini, I feel like this is one area in which I'm actually qualified to teach and make claims with some authority. Now, for those of you who don't know Pete and aren't familiar with his work, he's taught drummers like Mike Johnston, Michael Shrive, and he's also worked with Steve Smith, Cindy Blackman, and has gotten glowing reviews from drummers like Vic Firth and Jim Chapin regarding his books on polyrhythms. You can check out his 2 books, Polyrhythms, A Musician's Guide. This one is generalized rhythmic theory. You don't have to be a drummer, but you just have to understand rhythmic notation. And the second is Polyrhythms for the Drumset, which applies these concepts to popular drum set material. So hopefully that's enough to prove that I'm legitimate to talk about these concepts. Let's dive in. Alright, so first of all, why even bother with polyrhythms? Well, Pete describes it like driving on a highway. If all your rhythmic practice consists of trying to bury the click and practicing as close as you can to a metronome, it's like only being able to drive on one lane of the highway and not see any of the others. You're going to be stiff and you're going to try your hardest to make sure you don't move or waver from that lane, or in this metaphor, the rhythmic pulse. But with the knowledge and understanding of polyrhythms, it's like your brights open up and now you can see all other lanes of the highway. So you have the option and the freedom to navigate through lanes, or in this case, through these different time relationships. I hope that makes sense. More importantly, if another member of your band decides to dive into some polyrhythmic ideas, you don't need to freak out. You either have the option to follow them into this pulse, which we'll get into later, or you can stay confidently in your own lane while being able to understand the polyrhythmic ideas that your other band member might be expressing. It's mostly about giving yourself rhythmic options and just having a broader understanding of rhythmic relationships and how different pulses relate to each other. So let's define some terms, specifically polyrhythms and polymeters, and clear up some misunderstandings. For this, I'd like to defer to Rich Stitzel, who has given the study of polymeters some really deep thought and exploration. A polymeter is 2 or more meters happening at the same time, and they share a common subdivision. That's important. So in essence, a polymeter is different groupings of the same subdivision being played at the same time. Here's an example of a common polymeter. We have 4/4 time as our main pulse, which will be played with the bass drum and the hi-hat, which will give us our groupings of 4 16th notes. Then on the snare drum, we're going to play 16th notes, accenting every 3rd 16th note. This is going to resolve after 3 measures in 4/4. Here's what it sounds like. Now a polyrhythm is 2 or more evenly spaced note values with different subdivisions resolving in the same amount of time. So polymeters use the same subdivision and resolve at different times. Polyrhythms use different subdivisions resolving in the same amount of time. For example, 4 quarter notes resolving in the same amount of time as 3 half note triplets. Here's what that sounds like real quick. The 2 most important things here are when we resolve and the subdivision. So unfortunately, you'll see a lot of people online calling this a polyrhythm. This is just a rhythmic illusion using polymeter, and the reason it's not a polyrhythm, and Pete is real adamant about this, is because you're not getting out of 4/4 time. You're staying in 4/4, but you're not changing to these other lanes like 3/4, 5/4, 7/4, and all these numeric relationships are just ratios like in math. 3/4 or 3/4 means you have a pulse that is happening at 3/4 the speed of your basic main 4/4 pulse. Same thing with 5/4, it's 1 1/4 times as fast. Same thing with 6/4, it's 1 1/2 times as fast as your basic pulse. 7/4, 1 3/4 time. Same thing. I know I'm sounding like I'm talking about math, and trust me, I'm not a fan of math, so I'm going to get away from this as quickly as possible. But just to understand that the number in relation to 4 basically just creates a fraction, and that fraction determines the speed of our secondary pulse that we can change lanes to go into. So if we really understand the polyrhythmic relationship, we can totally switch lanes and start subdividing in this new pulse while keeping our 4/4 pulse in our head or in one of our limbs while we're playing the drums. So to demonstrate what that sounds like in 3/4, I'm going to take a common exercise called the subdivision ladder, which is changing your rate of subdivision from eighths to triplets to sixteenths. But I'm going to do that in 3/4. So my feet will be playing quarter notes, keeping my main pulse, while my hands are going to play in 3. So 3 notes are resolving in the same amount of time as 4 notes. And I'm going to subdivide the 3, going from eighth notes all the way up to 32nd notes and back down, hitting every subdivision in between, including quintuplets and septuplets. Here's what that sounds like. So with my mind and my body, I'm keeping track of 2 related pulses at the same time. Now here are some cool polyrhythmic phrases in 3/4 from Pete's book, Polyrhythms the Musician's Guide. Now you can get some really interesting and complex sounds happening if you do the same thing in 5/4 or 7/4, but in my opinion, I find those ratios to be less digestible and harder to understand as a listener than 3/4 or 6/4. But not to get too nerdy, the 3 and 6/4 ratios actually turn out to be consonant intervals when you speed them up, whereas 5 and 7 are more dissonant intervals.
Polyrhythms can also be described by simple ratios. The 3-2 ratio of a perfect fifth, when reinterpreted into rhythmic notation, is nothing more than just a 3-against-2 polyrhythm, or quarter notes against quarter note triplets.
So just know that they're available, but you should use them wisely. Just like if you're a harmonic instrument player and you start stretching out and using certain modal ideas or something like that. Alright, so I hope that clears up some confusion as to what polyrhythms actually are and how they're different from polymeters. And in my next video, I'll demonstrate how I've begun to develop my own polyrhythmic vocabulary. But for now, I just wanted to keep this a brief introduction to the concept of polyrhythms. Not to mention, to clear up some misinformation that's circulating around YouTube and Instagram specifically. So please feel free to check out Pete's books. I'll put links in the description below, so if you're interested, you can check those out on your own. And please visit Rich's website, drummantra.com, to learn more about polymetric relationships and how they can help develop your understanding of certain subdivisions. Besides that, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I hope you can use some of this information to enrich your drumming and expand your vocabulary. My name's Austin Koziel. I'll talk to you soon. Peace.